Well, hi, Amisha.
Hello, how are you?
Definitely just as jealous as Pearl is of all the people you guys get to work with. But I have a lot of questions because
All right.
you guys are doing really groundbreaking work and growing at what seems to be a breakneck pace.
Yes, it
So,
is.
in finance, I mean, you guys are definitely dealing with a lot of sensitive payment information and data going both ways. How are you able to innovate in that space?
On our product side is, more about, we have some AI, we've brought in some AI. We also co-innovate with our customers, but it's really about where we're taking finance and finance operations, right? So we do back end, which is payments and all payables, all payouts, right? So if you're trying to pay with an invoice, that's AP, accounts payable, known in finance, right? So we do
Mhm.
that. And then if it's non-invoice backed, for example, influencer networks, marketplaces, gaming, right, where your Roblox is one of our big customers too,
Yes.
Twitter, Twitch, right? So how do you want to pay everybody? You could be paying somebody a few dollars and somebody could be making thousands and thousands, right? And it's
Hmm.
anywhere in the world, right? So that's a different, and you don't have an invoice, it's not invoice backed, right? So we're
Yes.
payment and we're almost baked into some platforms. So that's also, requires a lot of, like you said, security, a lot of compliance, right? So being on top of compliance, being on top of security, being on top of, how these payments go out, rules change or all laws change, right? So really being on top of those things so that we can deliver, right, best in class experience to both the companies that we serve, and then the experience that everybody has getting paid by Tipalti is really important. So it's how do we make that experience seamless by following compliance? It's finance, right? So, and there's a lot of finance regulation. So we have a money license to transmit,
Hmm.
right? So not a lot of our competitors do. So just being on top of that, being very compliant is really important to us. And then innovating and making sure that experience, so we're always innovating that experience and keeping up with all the different payment methods that there are, right? Testing out new things.
And it seems to be very impressive. Like I said, you guys work with a roster that most companies drool after. But if we could take a step back for the people who are new to Chipotle and have not heard of you, how would you describe your business just at a very base level to those folks?
So we're a global payables automation company. We,
Hmm.
after, like I said, non-invoice backed and invoice backed payments. We
Hmm.
also do PO management. So we're really leaning into finance operations. And
Very
so,
good.
on that one side, and then when we work with folks like gaming, gaming industry marketplaces, we also work with IT and heads of product because they want to bake the payments into their product.
That's a very important point because I imagine you guys, from a marketing standpoint, have a lot of different audiences to speak to about something that's already B2B, which adds its own challenges, but is a very complex technical offering. So, what are some of the ways you have been able to help diversify those messages and really innovate in the ways you reach those people?
So it's really about looking at our personas and really saying,
Hmm.
okay, maybe our main persona is finance, but we also, for the non-invoice back payments, right, have different personas that we are targeting. So really, one of the examples I can give, we launched a creator economy campaign this year, right, in Q2, and it really speaks to, we chose gaming marketplaces and influencer networks, right, or in music, right? So that, looking at those specific industries, the language is very different in how things are addressed. So, that's something that needs to happen, right? Like speaking the language of the person you're targeting. And then, that was one, campaign that we did. We had interactive assets, and with the social that we did, and also the drips that, email drips that we did, everything spoke to each of those audiences in a very specific manner and addressing their specific pain points. They're similar, but they might call them different things, right? So really making sure you have that in place, and then offering something that's unique to check out, or something to do, because it is a different types of persona. And then looking over, in Q1 we did kind of a future finance, or finance, and we've changed that campaign now into finance efficiencies, because of where people are thinking about budgets, and finance is the first place where they have to take a look at everything and make sure that the company's, how do you create a sustainable growth model for your business, right? And so working and changing our campaign now to really speak to that is really important. So being able to understand market conditions, speak the language when you're targeting your persona is really, really important in all the different steps that you have, not just in that campaign. Think about the surround sound. So that's digital nurture, that's social, that's, you know, all your content syndication. Think of all the outbound and inbound, all the events you're going to, right? So making sure it's synergized. So when somebody is looking at your company or they come to you, they, oh, it's very similar messaging, and that's what you need, right? And then you can engage that person with something that really speaks to them versus, oh, I'm being marketed to, right? So
Oh,
that's a really
absolutely.
fine line we always walk, right? What is the right time in the buyer journey to say, okay, now is the time you want a phone call, right? So that without turning everybody off.
Yeah. It seems like personalization seems to be a big part of the strategy. And I've been reading a lot about personalization, how people want to be addressed, when they want to be able to make those purchasing decisions, and when they're still too high up in the funnel to even go there with. Um, what are some of the predictions you have for the finance personalization that will be available, in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think that we have to look at the buyer journey. It's changed quite a lot and it keeps changing. You know, cookieless is going to come in 2 years, right? So we really have to think about what is the offers that we're making and even be more altruistic in our offers and say, we need to educate our audience on something that they need to know. They're all dealing with a struggle. What is the struggle? And your answer can't just be, oh, it's our solution. It should be based on bringing in third-party experts, influencers, and almost like you're gathering a community. And when people come to you, they get access to that community, that content, that information, or even talking to those folks, right? And our videos, right? So have many different ways of communicating this and engaging folks, but it should be very targeted, right? And as we think about it, it's, you can't hit somebody with the same exact message over and over and over again. You really need to think about what are the different messages in the types of companies. So is it by industry? Is it by company size in finance? There's different pain points as companies grow bigger, right? So really realizing where you need to take the personalization and test it out with your audience. I think testing is something that, we don't do enough of. So I think investing in a good CRO strategy for your website, for your PPC page is really important. Thinking about your entire buyer journey and what the touch points are, what are the wow moments along that journey, and figuring out when is the right levers to turn people on. Also test what piece of content, which content is working well in what part of the buyer journey. So doing that analysis, taking a look at it, and then it's almost like having a dashboard, right? And creating, that's what we're working on, right? Is creating that buyer journey, looking at it piece by piece, and then analyzing what works, what doesn't, what works better together in a journey. And then when you have that, then you can know what the next step is to do, right? And then don't forget creativity. I think we are really thinking a lot about data and analysis. Third thing is look at, don't forget we are marketers. We like storytelling. The art of storytelling is not dead. It's there, really find it. But again, make it based on what your audience really needs. Talk to the people in your audience. That's why I think bringing in influencers and third-party experts to help you do that is really important, because then people feel like they're getting access to information or someone that they wouldn't normally have access to.
I agree with
That's
that.
important, right?
I agree with that. You're essentially putting the keys in the end user's hands to tell you how they want to interact with you versus you determining what all of those interactions will look like and what they'll be. Now, you did allude earlier to, I think, what is on a lot of marketers' minds, and it is, okay, what are we in for in the second half of the year? What changes might we need to make? What might we need to fine tune? I've definitely been getting this question from a lot of our partners where they're saying, what are your clients coming to you and saying? And I always say that because we are performance media, we're really always in a position where we have to prove what we're doing is working. It's all low funnel activity anyway. So we always have to prove or tie it back to, if you're giving us $1, we're giving you 3 back. So we're in a unique position to be able to be okay through any of the uncertainty, because it's really hard to make a cut when you know you're getting this many dollars back for every dollar you invest. But how would you say your media mix is evolving as we head into the second half?
I think you cut out for me for a second. You just say, where do you think we're going in the second half with everything
Yeah.
going on?
How
Right.
do you
So I
think the
think-
media mix is evolving based on any economic uncertainty going into the second half?
So I really think that, we've already all gone through the exercise of where we need to tighten up and where we are finding efficiencies. I think looking at your ROI and what channels are working and why, and what is driving for you, really what opportunities is really driving for your business is what you should be looking at. And then double down on the things that are really working, and then allow at least 5% or 5 to 10%, depending on what is allowed, right? What you have for testing and for experimenting, because you'll need that going into 2023. So think about, digital nurture, think about, what's working on your best channels, and, testing things out there, looking at and setting yourself up with a strategy. Yes, it's 2 years for cookieless, but there's a lot of testing that will need to happen. So start talking to other vendors or other people like, Quantcast or yourself, right? Like to really look at, what should I be preparing now? What should I be testing now? So that when that happens, I am. And by the way, 50% is already cookieless because they're, so we should already be doing that anyways, right? But do it now, test it out there and see what works. And you'll probably get better what you're investing. And by the way, for those, what do we call, walled gardens, you're already cookieless, right? So that's cheaper CPMs than walled, right? So if you think about it that way, you're going to be testing. So you should be starting to do that. I think you should look, we already talked about creating cohesive customer experiences. I think we really need to keep doing that. So, create your own customer journey map and make it visual so everyone, your marketing team, your marketing org can work on it together. I think there should be more collaboration versus less, right? How do you create a better user experiences across all devices? I think we still haven't gotten the hang of that yet. We still need to do that with storytelling, right? I think people forget about that, and the video content, I think, is still king. And your video content, simple things like making sure you have captions and all your video content, and providing it in a way, in bite-sized chunks, and then also having long form content. So people can choose their own adventure, right? Think about, everybody's like, talking also about conversational marketing. Are you testing that out? Your website is your biggest channel. What are you doing? And are you paying attention to what happens to your traffic, what they're interacting with, what's happening, how to improve that journey? I think people have forgotten about the website as a big channel. They do, but they don't. That's one of your big channels. You drive it too. When I say I work at Tipalti or whatever, what's the first thing it does? Oh, let me check you out. Right. So again, that's your calling card. What are you doing there? And how are you improving the journey? And do you have conversational marketing there? Right. And so is it working? Is it not working? And again, that's another place to make things more personalized.
That's true. Very true. By persona, as you mentioned earlier.
And we found that, interactive content does work too, right? Whether it's on social or, on your site or a campaign that you're doing. So that tends to work. It's not, no, don't make it gimmicky, make it important enough. Like, is it, you could even do a demo that somebody walks through, or you could do content that people pick different things and they're watching different videos or different content based on what they're interested in. Makes it interesting for them because it feels personalized, feels tailored, feels like an experience that you want to engage with. So I said, 4 or 5 things there, I think, that can really be, tied together well and create a cohesive customer journey.
I agree. But it does feel like there is every day a new app, a new platform, a new device that marketers need to
let B2C figure out what's working, and then no mistake. But test it out. If it makes sense, look, you should know where your persona is. If they live there, then yes, go there. Right.
I agree.
know where your audience is. If, yes, you can try out new things, but if your audience is never going to be on like TikTok, then they're never going to be on TikTok. So don't go there, right? And maybe your employees will, right? So it makes sense. I think, for your brand, there's employee, there's customer, and there's prospect, right? Those three, and we need to always be branding to all, with and for all three.
So then, do you believe there's a place for a brand on every platform, or do you think that the way we should be looking at fragmentation is just go where your fish are?
For me, because we're in a high growth business, we, and it's a very specific audience, I like to go where my specific audience is. And yes, you still want air cover, but go to air cover where your broader audience is, or your second level of influencers, whether it's CEOs, CIOs, or product, right? Like think about your first core and then what's surrounding the influence on them. And that's where you can go to the broader reach. But, my mom doesn't need to know about Tipalti, right? But most business people should, and especially high growth companies should know about Tipalti, because that's where we really help those companies grow.
So you spoke a little bit earlier about how you guys have tested influencers in some way. Can you talk a little bit about your approach there and your findings ultimately?
So for me, I think, just my background from SAP and how I started influencer marketing when nobody else was doing it, is people do influencer marketing in B2B for social media. And for my personal belief is we are not using it in the right way. It's influencer marketing really should be for demand gen. So if you think about bringing in influencers into your demand gen campaigns, into your demand gen paid search, paid social campaigns, that is going to yield real results. I think, yes, you can ultimately, the icing on the cake is in social and for brand, but it depends on what you want to do. If you're trying to get better brand awareness and you're doing influencer marketing for that reason, then yes, your social metrics, great. But for me, the bigger value is when you tie all of your customer, your buyer journey with influencer marketing and content, when you have it all the way through, and even in ABM, it makes a big difference. You get a better lift, you get better ROI for not that much more spend that you were going to do anyways. And you're creating more brand awareness. You'll be able to do a lot with just, one channel, with not one channel, but pick the right people. I always say, like, start with a core group try to build a core group of at least 15 people around your company. And when you do an asset, have 15 to 20 people in that asset, at least, right? If you want to create a big brand awareness, if you really want to do good demand gen, you have 5, right? And you're really working. So some things that we did where we did some co-created videos last year we did an IPO last year because it made sense last year, an IPO, because we work with a lot of high growth companies that were going IPO, right? Or that are thinking about it. So that's in our ICP. So we want to track those companies. So we worked with influencers to create videos around IPO, right? And that's, we don't do things around IPO, but it's more about, again, the topic that's on the mind of the people that we are trying to work with. And so by offering that content, that piece did well. We embedded the videos on our campaign landing page, and we had some other, really good informative content around it. And that worked really well. This year we're doing live radio with some influencers and content and turning those into podcasts. We're incorporating them into our show Illuminate. We have a lot of influencers speaking there, and we're going to be able to reuse a lot of the content that comes out of it. So that's a really great way. It attracts a better audience. You have to make sure that their audience is the audience you're looking for. So they have a like-minded audience, right? That's in your ICP. And then think about retargeting. You could be retargeting using their content and using it on their audience, right? In a very authentic way, but then it feels you're going to get that pull, right? Versus not. So I think that is something that I've seen when you use and you work with influencers in your demand gen programs is much better than just for social. You can do it for social, but I think you're missing, for the same amount of investment, you're missing out on what you can get much better, deeper ROI out of your influencer marketing program.
It's really extending the life of those campaigns when you think about it that way. That's a good point.
Because we do these campaigns and they shouldn't just live for a quarter. They should live for at least a year. So think
Yeah.
about that. Think about improving and adding things to it. And, we started with one campaign at the beginning of this year for AP, our AP audience and finance audience. We're changing that now as things have changed in the market
Mm-hmm.
to change that campaign so that we are able to reuse some content, but then we're updating certain things because it makes sense to. Otherwise, it would work with our audience.
Now, it sounds like you guys are a very flexible organization, and you have been able to implement a lot of the innovations you had planned for the year or for the last couple of years since you joined the firm. Um, what are some of the ways you deal with internal friction when you're trying to move the organization forward?
Are you talking
So
within
those
marketing or with stakeholders or?
with stakeholders in your company, obviously with you leading the marketing strategy and you have a very clear thought of where you all need to be or where you can be. How do you deal with some of the internal resistance to that or to maybe do things the way they've always been done?
So for me, when I walked into Tipalti last January, the relationship between marketing and sales is really very close. So we
Hmm.
plan with sales, we plan with finance, we plan with product, we plan. Yes, there are things that can always be improved and we continue working on that, but I don't see I walked into a great situation, to be honest, because there wasn't that friction of us versus them. And that's one of
Hmm.
the reasons why I joined Tipalti, is that it's really important to our, the executive leadership team here to really work together. And that's, figuring out how to make GTM even better than it is now, right? If we don't work together, if marketing is going to do and served it up to sales that here you go, we made our goals, enjoy, it doesn't give you the maximum value. We really plan, we're getting into our planning cycle. I'm working with sales to see what their playbook is. How can we make it better? They're working with us and giving us feedback, right? So then we really work together to build the business together. That's what
Hmm.
you really need to do. You need to reach out to your stakeholders and ask them what they're working on, what they need, understand like, okay, these things are coming out for product, these things are going to change for sales enablement, SDRs, right? And bringing everyone together and then planning together. So
Yeah.
that when you do launch something, it's not like we launch it now, it's like, oh no, we have to sell it. Oh no, we need to put a campaign out. It's already being thought of. And we just need to keep improving on that, right? Because sure, there can be improvements made everywhere, right? But it's really key to communicate and plan together with your stakeholders as much as you can. Because what are we marketing then, right?
Yeah.
And then for us, like we sell to mostly finance and others. I, ask the personas that you're selling to in your company, does this work for you? How do you think this goes?
Yeah.
Have them share things that they like from other companies in your space. They're like, this
Hmm.
would work for me. And I'm always looking at our competitors, what they're doing. I think it's really important.
Yeah. I agree with that, and we do that as well. In fact, we've dedicated so many work sessions to just going through the inspiration. Where are you finding inspiration, whether it's happening inside our industry with agencies and other specializations, or just happening in the world. We recently did a campaign based on the Little Miss memes, which is just tapping into a trend that already had people's attention. So I agree with that. One thing I wanted to ask you is just looking at the nature of your business and the fact that you guys deal with a lot of sensitive data. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of risk associated with that information inflow and outflow. I see that there seems to be a very close relation between finance and trust. What are some of the ways you guys are able to build trust, and how have you done that within your marketing?
To build trust on the team or between.
Between you and your prospects or you and your existing customers.
I think it's by showing them, right? And by
Hmm.
having that experience and by working very closely and co-innovating. So when we bring somebody in, right, one of the things that is a differentiator for Tipalti is our support. We do have support. We're not shipping you off somewhere else and saying, okay, now call this number, off you go. We actually have a real support team here. In fact, we built out a whole, office in Texas this past year. We
Oh, wow.
launched it last year. Yeah. And so we have operations. And so we really, around the world, and we really want to provide that support to our customers. So when they come in, they know they have someone, they know where they can call, where they can talk to a live person or get the right support that they need.
Mhm.
That is really important, offering that support. So during the sales cycle, we do show like, here's the support. We have a 99% customer, retention rate. Why do we have that? Because we work and we really try, we work with the folks we know we can work with and bring in the right prospects and customers. And then also our customers tell our story for us, right? That
Yeah.
this is working and that we stay with companies. We don't, when people start scaling, we started with Roblox and Noom and others, like maybe they weren't as big. They were smaller organizations. Now they're huge. We scale with them. We stay with them, right? And I think that's really important. And when you can share those stories out, there is trust that you can demonstrate by show and tell. And I think that's really important, is the show and tell through your customers and through your track record. That becomes very important during someone's buying journey.
Yeah, I do think that depending on the economic situation we find ourselves in, not only is trust always going to be one of those storytelling, I want to call it bedrocks. Thank you, brain. Storytelling bedrocks, but it's going to become key. Who are those brands that tell their story the best and have the most credibility, and how are they building? So very good.
I think that's really important. Trust, especially right now, is really important. I think trust is really very hard to gain and really can be lost in a moment, in one post, right? Like we say that.
Yes.
We live in that culture where it's like one post and you're out, right? Kind of. So it's really important that to be authentic also, right? We're very authentic at Tipalti, right? Sometimes to a fault. And so
relatable. We can definitely relate.
Yeah. So, we want to think about that, right? And I think, we're talking about innovation. I know we have to kind of close up now, but, think about trust, and all of those things are really important. And part of that is also trust with your employees. I think we're living in this crazy time. It's still coming and we're still evolving and learning from it, is being open. And I think one of the things that our CEOs is come as you are with our employees, right? So I think it's really important to have that transparency in your culture and trust with your employees. One of the things that we talk about innovation, how do we get innovation, right? Within, how do you force, like if you're in a big company, like I was at SAP, and then I cut, Tipalti is smaller, you can still have innovation. So I launched an innovation contest, took a little bit of my budget aside and said, whatever project, but it cannot be a project that you try to get money for, now you don't have money, but really think about an innovative way, or where we can market, or some project that you'd really want to do that's very inspirational, or something that is testing, it's not proven, and there's a small bucket of money. And we did a whole judging panel with our execs. And so it was we ended up with 5 teams that made it to the finals. And, one of those teams won the project, and their project was, around taking something fun and doing something around a beach, make payables your beach, and that's going to launch soon. So it was a video series, and it's going to be something interesting, but something that I would not have necessarily invested in, because I don't know what the ROI is, and we don't, it could be brand. So it's that's a way to get innovation, but also some of the innovations that came up, the ideas were really good, but just not really executable now. So people can have those ideas going forward, but it's making everybody think about, oh, if we didn't have any bars or anything, what could we do? And so sometimes that's a way to, and that also creates some good team camaraderie. So a lot of good things can come out of, kind of doing some innovation like that. If you have a much larger team or a bigger company, it's easy, you could do that. Or even somewhere where, we're constantly moving at the pace that we are, to allow for some of that to happen for your team.
That's a good point, because that's where I was going to go next. Creativity is one of those things that is a double-edged sword sometimes. Certainly in the finance space, I'm just curious, what are some of the ways you encourage just your internal marketing team to think creatively and to get creative about the types of content they're putting out? How have you been able to approach that?
So I think we have to plan together. We can't just do it in silos, right? And I think brainstorming is good. We don't do enough of that. I know we're now all on Zoom, everybody's everywhere, but it's important to brainstorm. It's important to look at what others are doing, what, our SEO team might see something really great. And then they can report back to the content team. The content team could be saying, hey, we're noticing that on our pages and web, this is happening. And they tell the campaigns team. So it's really cross collaborating, sharing what's working and what's not across the entire team. That really is going to help us think about how we innovate, where we invest, and then asking the teams to brainstorm with different people. Don't just brainstorm with your team. Bring in people from other teams. Bring in the persona. We did a blended brainstorm with the finance team, and that was really great for the marketing team as well as the finance team. And now we have a Slack channel where we can, if we have an idea, we're not really sure if this is going to work or not. We can actually ask people that we're targeting. Will this work? Will it not? Why not? What would you do better? Right? Is this the right language? Does this hit? Right? So you do that with your customers as well, right? But
very cool. I like the idea of doing that. We do something similar on Slack. I think in an environment where, like you said, everyone is everywhere, whether you're virtual, hybrid, or in the office, having something that you can use to collaborate in real time just makes for a richer end product. So what is Tipalti's approach to officing right now? Are you guys in the office? Are you hybrid? How are you guys approaching it?
we're hybrid.
Okay.
So it depends where, we are in many different offices, right? So we have 2 offices in Canada. We have 2 offices in the United States. We're in London. And so as we continue to expand, we are a hybrid model. So it's, we come to the office a few days a week and then a few days off. So we can have teams come together in our hubs. And it's important, right? Because you have that team camaraderie. And then when we're not together, right, get stuff done, we still have Zoom. We've all gotten used to that. So having that mixed approach and flexibility has been really good. And we just came back to the office more recently in California, right? So it depends on the laws everywhere as well.
That's true.
And safety is really important. So making everybody feel really safe. So to come to the office here in our San Mateo office, we have to be tested because that's a protocol here.
Okay.
And that just is, people feel safer. We recently had a spike, so we shut down the office for a couple of weeks while that was going on, and then we opened it back up for testing. So just making sure that everyone feels safe and following guidelines and being flexible with folks who maybe immune compromised and things. Just talking to your employees and having those conversations is important.
Okay. And then one last question around your Illuminate conference. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and some of the fun things you guys have planned?
I would love to. So Illuminate is our annual conference. We had our first one last year. It was all virtual for obvious reasons. This year we're having a hybrid model. So our big opening keynote and everything will be on September 14th. And then on the 15th, we have an event in San Francisco, and then in London in the UK, a full day, half day events with content. And in San Francisco, we have, if you remember the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt, we have Billy Beane, who that movie was inspired, it was about him. He'll be speaking here in San Francisco. It's a really small event with only 100 people that we're expecting because we wanted to keep it more intimate. You will get to see him in person, spend time with him. So if you're in the Bay Area and you're interested in finance and you are inspired by the movie Moneyball, come check it out. But we did a hybrid because we want to give choice to everybody. And so, people can learn, and we have a lot of CPE credits and other things. So there's a lot of thought leadership and what's going on in finance. We have VCs and other CFOs and other finance folks talking about the important issues of what's going to happen for the rest of this year, 2023. So a lot of our customers are looking at fundraising, some are looking at stability and sustainable business models. So we're talking about all those different things that really matter to finance and payments audiences.
And how did you come up with the name? I assume, how did you come up with the name Illuminate?
So we went through a branding exercise. We have an amazing in-house creative team. They actually did all the creative. This is not done by an agency. This is done by our in-house team.
Awesome.
All the creative is done in-house. And so we really worked on what would be inspiring. Last year was our first conference. Try to think about what matters to people. Could we do a theme that makes sense? And, some people have to be inspired, but to feel good, we're coming out of something. And so we ended up looking at different words and what they mean. And we ended up with the word illuminate. because it felt like, okay, we want to be kind of a guiding light. We want to be bright, right? We want to shine. We want to do those things for people because that's what people really need as we're coming out of everything we're coming out of, and that we can continue, right? So our conference will just be called Illuminate for that reason, because it's positive, it's forward, it's about working with our customers and kind of being that guiding light. So
Oh, no, that's such a great story. Thank you for sharing it with us. Well, I think those are all the questions I had for today. Is there any one last parting thought you'd like to leave with the audience here about Tipalti or about yourself?
no, I think that don't be afraid to try new things, right?
Mhm.
And don't feel like you are getting stuck. If you're getting stuck, talk to other people and see what they're working on, see what's working. We're all marketers, we're all at the heart, we're all storytellers. So how do you tell your story? Always be checking on how you're telling your story, who you're telling it to, why you're doing it, right? So don't forget the why. I think we get really focused on results and say, why are we doing this in this way? Should we be doing it differently? Would it have a different effect on our audience, right? Make sure you're asking all the questions. I think that's really, really important to have those conversations and take that in. And then you'll come out with something that makes a difference.